Hi everyone, I'm Polly and this is Every Trick on the Hook. In this video I am going to share with you my method for invisible joining to a standing stitch, and I'm going to show you by demonstrating on this piece of double crochet in the round. It's real simple. I just started with a standing double crochet and worked double crochet all the way around just for a basic demonstration. So just like regular invisible join, the first thing that I'm going to do is I already snipped my yarn, so I'm going to pull the yarn through the stitch and thread it onto my needle. And then the first thing you do is find the second stitch and insert your yarn under the top two loops of the second stitch, just like regular invisible join so far. And then I'm going to go back to the last stitch and insert my hook down through the middle. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make sure I get the back loop and the third loop and pull my yarn through. Now before I pull it too tight, what I want to do is move this yarn a little bit forward because I want to look at the standing stitch again. I want to identify the back loop of the standing stitch and the third loop and pull my needle and yarn through those two loops, just like I did on the last stitch. Now I'm going to pull my yarn tight until it is just about the size of all the other loops on the top, so it blends right in. And then go ahead and turn your work over. I'm going to run my needle down the back of my stitch just to sort of secure this yarn and give it a place to go. After that you can go ahead and weave it in the other stitches, but I'm going to skip that for right now so I can show you the next step. I'm going to turn my work over and I want you to look at the back of the standing stitch. You can see this knob right here. That's the knot from the standing stitch, and it kind of sticks out. It's not very nice, is it? So what do you do with that? Let's thread this on our needle, and what I'm going to do is identify the last stitch, which is the stitch right here next to the standing stitch, and find the third loop. I'm going to take my needle and go up under the third loop from the bottom to the top, under the third loop, and pull the working yarn through and sort of give it a tug that will secure the knot under that third loop. It might sit under it, it might pull through. It depends how long that little knot from your standing stitch is. But I'm just going to give it a little tug and set it in place, and then I'm going to find the third loop of the stitch right before that. I'm going to go from top to bottom and pull my yarn through there. That just sort of sets it in place and tells it what direction we want it to pull in, and that pulls the knot flat. After that I'll just weave my yarn down the back of that double crochet, and then after that I can go ahead and weave my yarn in. But I will save that for later so that I can show you what it looks like. Okay, so here's our yarn, and it just sort of pulls that little knot flat so that it doesn't bump out anymore. It's not nubby anymore. With a standing stitch, you're always going to be able to feel a little bit of a knot right there, but with this method, it's nice and flat, so you really won't see it. And from the front it looks really good. Where is it? Oh, here it is. Here's our standing stitch, and you can only kind of tell it's there because it has one little extra piece of yarn that sticks out right there. That's the only way you can really tell it's there. It's a really good, clean way to do things. Now I want to show you how to do it with a chain in the mix. So here's a piece I did with double crochet and chain one in between. So how am I going to invisible join this? Started with a standing stitch, ended with a chain one. So what I'm going to do is same thing, pull my yarn through and thread it on my needle, And now instead of having a second double crochet to work into, I just have a chain 1. So what I'm going to do is insert my needle under the top 2 loops of the chain 1. There's a third loop underneath. I'm going to make sure that stays under my needle because I don't want my needle to go into the space. I want it to go through this chain 1. And pull my yarn through. And now I'm going to go back through the last chain 1. It's really just sort of going through the back loop, but it's kind of right down the middle too at this point. And that's pretty similar. Now I'm going to go back to the standing double crochet I started with. I'm going to pick up that back loop and the third loop and pull my yarn through that. Then I can give it a little tug until it's about the right size to match the rest of them. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to thread my yarn down the back of the stitch just to secure it. And after that, I would probably thread it back up and through here and do some such nonsense weaving it in to get it hidden. But for now, I'm just going to leave it so I can show you. Next step is to secure that yarn from the standing stitch. So it's extra nubby and hanging out in this case because we just had that chain 1. So if you look from the front, the chain 1 is kind of looser over here than it is on a normal chain 1 space. Where we have the standing stitch, it just kind of hangs open a little bit. So look at the back, thread that yarn from your standing stitch on your needle, and then what I want you to do is find the bottom loop of that chain 1, the one that you finished with, and I want you to insert your hook underneath it and pull that standing stitch flat up against it. After that, find the third loop of a double crochet right before it, or whatever's right before it. Find the third loop or find something similar and thread your needle under that, and then you can kind of keep going, weaving your end in. But what that does is gives you the look of a chain 1 space. So if you compare these two chain 1 spaces, you can see underneath they both have a little bit more going on than it did before. This is a little more secure, and it's a little more bulky than a regular chain 1 space, but it's much closer than the last one. If you had tried to work into the chain 1 space before we wove that end in, you would have found it was really weak, and your other stitches would kind of hang funny. So now it's a lot more secure and looks a lot more like regular chain 1 spaces. So that is how I like to invisible join to standing stitches, and this technique works on all the stitches. I showed you on a double crochet because they are the easiest to find the third loop. I will post a link to how to find the third loop if you need help with that. I'll post the link in the comments, or no, in the notes section, the description section of the video. And yeah, this technique should work on half double crochet and single crochet and pretty much any other stitch you try. It's the same general idea on getting that yarn from your standing stitch woven in so that it lays flat on the back and doesn't stick out anymore. That's it. Thank you for watching.